Welcome back, everybody. We're live here at the Lighthouse Treatment Center, and this is the Lighthouse Addictions Topic Show. I'm your host. My name is Joe, and I'm here with our wonderful, fearless leader, Chuck Richardson. He is the executive director here at the facility, and today we're going to be talking about forgiveness.
It's nice to be here, Joe. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And for me, I feel like forgiveness is the act of liberating ourselves from prisoners of our past to being able to be present and in the present moment. So what do you feel like forgiveness is?
Well, I'm going to say a couple disclaimers
Sure.
because I'm going to be very open and honest about a little bit about myself and my past. But more of a disclaimer about what we represent here at Anaheim Lighthouse. We are a 12-step program, and for me to share a little bit about forgiveness means I have to kind of introduce the subject of my faith a little bit, because that was an important component of how I got clean and how I've stayed clean for the last 24 years. But that's not to say, I don't try to push my faith off onto anybody else, but it is an important part of how we become whole as an individual. It's the willing act of actually allowing somebody to develop an empathetic response to somebody. Forgiveness is one of the hardest components, but if you really want to turbocharge your life and your recovery, forgiveness is probably one of the most important components that you're going to have to learn how to deal with. And forgiveness, I always look at it in two ways. There's I look at it in kind of three ways. First, I needed, because of the lifestyle I lived and some of the things that I did, I came to my recovery very messed up. Mm-hmm. I had some horrible things that had happened. I had abandonment issues, childhood sexual trauma. I had a number of issues that really impacted my early development, and I brought those into my addiction. And so there was the element of forgiveness of others, but because of the things that I did in my addiction, I also had some unresolved issues about the things I did while I was in the military. I really needed something beyond the forgiveness of man. I really needed a forgiveness from a higher power. And I'm going to leave that term very general because, like I said, I don't want to force my faith on anybody. The 12 steps is developed in such a way that we can choose our higher power. And I encourage everybody who's in recovery to have a relationship with a higher power, because a program is always able to fill in some holes, but I think there's some holes in a man or a woman's heart that only can be filled by a higher power. And I needed something that was going to relieve me of the burden of guilt and shame that I carried as a result of my own actions. I tell the story often about being a man of influence. And, on the sports field, I was always a positive influence, team captain. I was always a leader. I knew I had influence there. In the military, obviously becoming part of a special forces unit, being able to become a leader was quite natural in your progress of becoming an elite soldier. But in my addiction, I had no idea how much of an influence I was until I began to really get solid in my recovery and began to realize that if you hung out with me, you were probably going to get worse. You might have smoked a little pot and drank a few beers, but in a week of hanging out with me, we'd be doing meth and you'd be committing crimes with me. And so along that way, I realized that I influenced a lot of people down a very destructive road. And when I started to get clean, that burden was quite heavy on me. And I needed a sense of forgiveness that only could come from a higher power. And the relationship that I developed with God for myself, I really needed some sense that there was a way for me to be admonished of my guilt. Because most of us who are in recovery and struggle with addiction, we carry so much guilt, blame, and shame that it really, it's a soul destroyer for us. And we really need something that's going to restore our soul or bring us back to a sense of wholeness or oneness, in ourselves. So I really needed that relationship in my life to actually begin to develop the compassion and empathy that was going to give me the ability to forgive the people who had kind of influenced my life in a very destructive way. So that sense of having a higher power, I think, is essential. I know some people kind of struggle with that concept within the 12-step community, but it is one of the more important ones, I think, because from a psychological point of view, the whole process of forgiving ourselves is going to be important for our well-being and for that sense of wholeness that I just mentioned. But having a higher power, the ability to say that somehow I've been forgiven or I've been set free from the influence of my own guilt makes me psychologically stronger. It means that I can now not live in the past, but I can actually progress forward in the future. Yeah. I can actually develop the skills and the character to become the man or the woman that I want to be. And so that relationship, I think, is probably one of the more important aspects of learning what it is to be forgiven. And it's part of us developing a relationship with a higher power that allows us to, kind of surrender. I know that's a big part of the 12 steps, is saying that we're powerless. But powerless over our own thoughts and our own feelings and our own distortions of those thoughts and those feelings is a very powerful influence that keeps us trapped within our old way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And having the ability to be set free from them is very influential. The other part is being able to forgive others. That's sometimes hard because most people think that forgiveness somehow is a way of condoning somebody else's actions, but it's actually being able to set yourself free from the power and the influence of somebody else's actions. Sure. And a lot of us, who come through treatment or maybe struggle with addiction, we're already so beat up by the choices we made and the things that happened to us. So we all come here so damaged that how do I ever develop empathy for somebody who's maybe wounded me? And that could have come in many different forms. For me, as I said, I had a childhood abandonment issue, childhood sexual abuse. I had things that happened while I was in school, things that just, where others hurt me, let me down, or broke my heart and broke my spirit. But finding a place where I can actually say, what, I forgive you, and I said it with enough certainty to realize that, I was not going to allow their actions to influence or dictate my life. Yes, that I was going to be able to choose to live the life that I deserved and that I was worthy of. But I needed to come to a place where I could actually release, just take my hands off the influence that they had upon my life. So that sense of being able to let somebody go means that I can move forward. I can never live in the present, like you said, if I'm living in the past. And so many of us are trapped by old experiences that we can never move forward. And that's often because we can never let go of that, because we can't find the ability or the power to release ourselves from their negative influence. And probably the third most important is the ability to forgive ourselves.
In your own opinion, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you feel like are people authentically able to forgive other people if they haven't begun the process of forgiving themselves first?
I think the process of forgiving ourselves is really kind of the kickstart for all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a thing within the realm of psychology when it comes to forgiveness called a knee-jerk reaction to forgiveness, that it's kind of a throwaway comment. But real ability to forgive somebody means that I've matured enough in my understanding of who I am to say that, what, I don't condone what you did, but what, somehow I can I can live past this moment. I can forgive you enough to move forward. But that's hard when we look through the lens of our past. Most of us in our addiction, we did some really dodgy stuff. We hurt people, we let people down, we developed lying as a way to, to justify our actions. Some of us did horrible things. We sold our skills, sold our body, sold our talents, sold our souls, to our addiction. And how do I come to a place where I can actually, forgive myself? And that only comes from, like I said, part of that is that spiritual component. Yeah. But it's also coming to realize that I've done that deep inner work in myself, to realize who I am and how I become that individual. For some of you who don't know, the times I went through treatment and my exposure, whether it was coming out of jail and being clean or getting help and being clean, I would be able to sustain that for a period of time. But after a period of time, life circumstances and situations and my own emotional immaturity and my pain in the way I felt about myself would eventually pile up. Yeah. And because I had taught myself in my addiction that when I felt a certain way, I knew how to alleviate it. I knew, and I would just go get loaded. And I might have had 3 weeks clean time, a month clean time. It didn't really matter. That was all very disposable at that time. But getting to a place where I can actually open my heart to actually begin to look at who I was as an individual, how I became that man that had to rely upon a substance. I had to really come to a place where I could say, you know what, those were the actions I did, but that is not who I am.
Yes.
But so many people nowadays tend to associate their actions with who they are as a person. And it's like we tell the people in our program or come through our programs, you are not what you did. Somebody always has the character and ability to be something way beyond that. But how do I ever realize that? And that really becomes from the self-analyzation where the process of self-forgiveness really begins. I think that it's one of the harder components because forgiving ourselves, we can never really truly develop a strong psychological opinion of ourselves. We can never really develop a healthy self-image unless we can forgive ourselves. If we're still going to beat ourselves up, for the things that happened, 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we can never ever mature. We're still trapped in the same mentality and same emotional state that we were in our addiction. So I think that process is one of the key things to actually becoming, truly, living out your potential as an individual. That answered your question.
Thank you. Yes, it did.
So I think, there's enough research to show that self-forgiveness is a key component to overall good mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but how do I do that when I've done such horrible things? And it's hard when you get on this side of your recovery and you start to live clean, feel clean, to actually look back and think, we forget how messed up we were, and some of the decisions that we made in that process. But we were under the influence. We were under the influence of a substance that altered the way we thought and the way that we behaved. And because of that, we kind of end up in a situation where I look at my life from this side of recovery and I think, well, that was just my actions or my behavior. I should still beat myself up or hold myself accountable. But most people that end up in addiction probably wouldn't make most of the decisions that they made if they were actually clean at that moment. They were in their right mind. So the fact that we tend to look at, like I said, through this lens of our past and still beat ourselves up is it's a critical element of our negative thinking. We want to still beat ourselves up, break ourselves across the coals of life, and say that that I shouldn't have done those things. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done those things, but I wasn't in my right mind. I wasn't making the right decisions. Otherwise, why would I hurt my family? Why would I hurt my children or a partner in a relationship? Why would I do those things? Why would I jeopardize my life?
Yeah, if you were clean.
Why would I jeopardize my life or my freedom by being involved in criminal behavior or things like that? So looking at it from the point of view that if I'm doing well in my recovery today, I'm doing well. I'm not doing the same things I did in the past. So if I'm doing good things today, why can't I live in this moment, not live in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that resentment is one of the number one triggers for drug addicts and alcoholics to relapse. What do you feel about resentment in recovery, and how do people attain forgiveness while they're already in recovery?
So, resentment is kind of the byproduct of unforgiveness in the first place, at least from my perspective.
True, that is true.
Again, I'll be very real to me. why was a soldier? I had married a girl that I went to high school with, and everything was good. We were living overseas, and she had gotten really bad cancer, and we went through a number of years of trying to battle this, and she started to get well, and just shortly after she went into remission, a person who I considered a very close friend, somebody I spent a lot of time with, had been to my home on multiple occasions, came to my house while I was on a mission in South America and raped my wife. And once I found out that who had done it and everything, I had determined in my heart I was going to kill this man.
Yeah.
I was very, I'm very honest about that now. But it was one of the things when I left the military and the relationship fractured and we separated, I was still determined. I was going to end this man's life, and I really didn't care. And my life,
the rage.
He was from North Orange County here in Southern California, so he was close enough to where I would be able to find him. But it was kind of the fuel that I used, that resentment, that bitterness was the fuel that I used to kind of justify my addiction. If this hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't be like this.
Yeah.
But that's, in addiction, we're always looking for justification system. We're looking for a reason why I can use drugs and not be accountable to life or the people in my life. Whether that's I was a bad student, or my dad wasn't there, my mom wasn't there, or I didn't get enough love, or that girl cheated on me back when I was 16. We create all kinds of justifications, but that was my justification, reason for being so destructive in my life. And it was one of the things that when I started to get clean, and I didn't have any faith at that point, but I knew somewhere, somebody had quoted once in the Bible that, revenge was for the Lord. And I went on this little search trying to find this in the little Bible my mom gave me while I was in jail. And I actually found it, but it was later on because I actually ended up in a faith-based program. That's the program that got me clean, where I actually came to understand what that meant was to hold on to that resentment. That's the fuel that we use to kind of, give us a license to do whatever the heck we want with life. And as long as we hold on to those resentments, we're always going to be trapped in the past. The moment that we somehow conjure up the ability and willingly, initiate forgiveness, then all of a sudden we're free from that. We don't have to hold on to that. We don't have to live in that past experience that somehow dictates what our future is going to be like. So I think resentment is one of those things that all of us bring to addiction. But the addict is very rarely ever resentful of the drug.
That's so true.
We're resentful at our parents. We're resentful at the broken relationship. I'm resentful that I got caught for whatever crime I did. We're resentful at the staff and treatment. We're resentful at everything other than the substance that really was the destroyer in my life. So oftentimes resentment is very misplaced. But getting past that point of resentment to the point where you can actually, look at yourself and say, I made mistakes. But as long as I don't make those mistakes in the future, I can actually become a better man or a woman than I've been living. And then our real potential is released. And then we can start to actually not just make a difference in our own life. We can actually start to make a difference in the people that we hurt, let down, or maybe broke their heart. One of the biggest components of the 12 steps is somehow making amends.
That's huge.
And we always think of amends in the terms of, going to the others that we've wronged. But do we ever stand and look in the mirror and say, can I make amends with myself? Because the moment that happens, everything changes in that person's life. Now they have the ability to start to honor themselves. They begin to have the feelings that generate a certain type of love for themselves. They can start to appreciate the life they're living, the things that they possess, and the people who come into their life. And that's a whole different transformation.
That's beautiful. Oh, so how do you yourself practice forgiveness? I know in the big book there's a chapter on, they advise you to, if you have a resentment towards someone, you pray for them every day for 2 weeks. What is your practice?
It's not much different than them because I am a man of prayer. Prayer is my primary tool for dealing with most of life's issues. So it's one of the things that I learned how to do in the recovery program I was in, and it's still something I do every day, 365 days a year, despite what day of the week it is or how I feel. I always have to, for me, having that relationship with my higher power, how do I get my higher power's understanding of that individual? Because, Joe, you might have hurt me really bad. I might even be sitting here doing an interview with you. Not that you have hurt me, but I might sit here and be, cordial with you, and actually hold resentment towards you.
Yeah.
But if I can gain an understanding of how my higher power sees Joe, then I can have empathy, I can have compassion, I can see who you really are.
Yeah.
That your actions were maybe motivated for the wrong reasons, but actually you're a really good person. And if I can get that attitude, then I can have a much more empathetic stance with you. But it also means that it gives me the opportunity to, say, I forgive you because I'm going to release you from the negative influence you had upon my life.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use this experience as a way to kind of propel me towards where I want to be as an individual. Because the thing that you did to hurt me, I might resent it, or I could also see it as, a little way of, life poking its finger in my chest saying, this is an area that you need to work on. You want to be this person, but you're acting like this person. And sometimes, the resentments or the hurt that people display to us can be an opportunity for us to really examine who we are, where we're at in our recovery, where we're at in our spirituality, but where we're at in our character. And it's one of the things that, most clients or people who come in contact with me through this program, the other programs or my mentoring, that I'm always challenging them about character. Because destiny always says I'm here, but if my character's here, I can never reach that. But if life circumstances and even the people who come along and wound us, if that gives us a chance to actually examine our own self, our own motives, and how we respond to that, we can actually achieve a much higher character, and we can get close to our true destiny.
You said something which I found really profound as well, like sobriety sister once told me when I was going through something like, how dare you think of this person that hurt you that way, because they are also a child of God. And when they said that to me, I was like, okay, well, they're just human and I have to honor that, and sometimes hurt people,
And that's a very true statement. We're all being perfected each day. As long as we're working hard on who we are as an individual, trying to be the best influence, trying to be the best individual, trying to be supportive to the people around us, trying to rebuild the bridges that maybe have been destroyed in life, and trying to, make ourselves available to others, we're always, have to have a certain amount of, I use the term loosely, grace towards other people, because we're often dealing with sick individuals, hurt individuals, There's a famous author that says, we're not, I remember now because it just slipped my mind, we're not bad people, we're just hurt people trying to get better.
Yes, absolutely.
And that person who often hurts you is probably hurting in some way. And it's often said that, we often hurt the people who are closest to us, and if our relationship is close enough for you to wound me, you must have significance. And if you have significance, how can I look at your situation and maybe what you're going through from an empathetic point of view and understand that, maybe what you don't need is my anger. Maybe what you need right now is my compassion, love, and dedication to you. And that's a whole different thing. Because that's a breeding ground for empathy.
You're teaching me a lot of lessons right now, Chuck. Well, thank you so much for your time and for being here. That was an amazing session.
Thank you very much.
Such an interview. And just a reminder, we are here on Thursdays at 3 p.m., so check us out. Bye.
Bye-bye, folks.